My name is Jeremy, and this is Good Beer Matters.
I realized that I didn't like bad beer. Until I started drinking good beer, things changed. Brazil is the third biggest producer of beer in the world. What's different about the Brazilian beer scene? So I'll definitely check the wood. I definitely would check the Catarina Sour. And we now have hops in Brazil.
Brazil is one of the largest countries in the world with cultural and environmental diversity to match. So why don't we talk more about Brazilian beer? My next guest is a beer educator, and she wants to change the way we think about Brazil within the world of beer. We find great experiences at the intersection of craft and culture. These are the stories of us, of great food and the beer that brings it all together. For the craft and culture of beer, this is episode 130 of Good Beer Matters with Beer Sommelier, Priscilla Colares. Well, welcome back to the Good Beer Matters podcast. I think I say this every time because I'm just like a little kid in a candy store, or in this case, a big kid in a beer store who just goes up to random people, says, "Will you be my friend?" And that's just how it works in the beer world. And so my new beer friend lives currently in the Netherlands, which that's a different story, but is from Brazil. Priscilla, it's so great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for inviting me, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to be here sharing information about the Brazilian craft beer scene.
I have not been to Brazil. I have not been south of the equator, and I'm trying to remember. I think it might be the furthest south I've been, may have been Belize. So I need to get out a little bit more. And so what I want to learn today is just more about the beer culture of Brazil. When we think about Brazil, you brought it up prior to this conversation. We think about football, we think about Carnival, and all the stuff that, I think of beach volleyball, when it comes to Brazil, right? There's all of these things that we think about Brazil that we see on TV that, is portrayed in the movies. I want to know the reality, particularly of the beer world within Brazil. But first, I want my guest to learn more about you and what you do and your background in beer. Will you please share that with us?
Sure. I drink beer since I was in college. I didn't like it very much in the beginning, but I realized that I didn't like bad beer. Until I started drinking good beer, things changed. So the beer that changed my palate was a Hefeweizen that was made in Brazil, but had a very German name. So at the time I thought was something that was from Germany. And it was so good because beer in Brazil, the average beer, it doesn't taste good. So after that, I got very into beer. And I used to collect beer caps. And in college, everybody known me for my beer cap collection. And every time that somebody had a different beer, they always bring it for me to try. But that was a long time ago when we didn't have that many craft breweries in Brazil. And then I moved to the US in 2010. And I lived in Florida, New York, and Rhode Island. I was working in the hospitality industry. And then I was like, oh my God, so many different flavors, so many options. And after 3 years in the States, I came back to Brazil and I decided that I wanted to work in beer. So in the beginning, I tried, I was wondering why we didn't have any beer from Brazil in the US. And I was trying to convince the breweries to export beers. But at the time, this was like 10 years ago, they were starting. So they were trying to make into the national market more. And then I did a sommelier course in Brazil with the beer sommelier courses like the Cicerone for the US. So we have something now around 10,000 people that did this beer sommelier course. So I also did this course, and I start working with events, tastings, guided tours to breweries, and that's a little bit what I do today also. I travel a lot and I share everything about beer in my Instagram. So I work as a beer sommelier, doing events, guiding tasters, and doing publicity on Instagram as well.
So, do you teach beer? Do you work for particular brands, or do you kind of go more of like the influencer route?
Um, I used to work with some projects for a specific brewery a few years ago, but they got closed before the pandemic.
Mm,
And now I kind of work more as an influencer, but also with a lot of beer brands. I enjoy more not being in a exclusivity kind of setting.
yeah. Um, so let's talk more about the beer sommelier that you're doing. Is that the Domans program, or is there a different one?
There is in Brazil a lot of schools.
Okay.
So a lot, I mean, that probably around 10 schools that teaches this type of class. Uh, so it's all over. I give classes specific to one school that's called Instituto da Cerveja or Beer Institute at the Brazilian Beer Institute. So there they have courses about sommelier. They also have technical courses for people that want to work in breweries and other beer related courses as well.
Gotcha. And I'm sorry if you set the date. When did you do that, and how long have you been a beer sommelier?
Um, I did the course in 2013. So this year it's like it's going to be 10 years that I work specific as a beer sommelier.
Well, then happy anniversary.
Thanks.
And real quick, because it's my morning, your evening, so you're drinking beer and I'm not, and I'm a little bit jealous. Tell us about the beer you're drinking.
Well, I'm drinking a West Coast IPA from my favorite brewery from Brazil, which is in my city. It's called Flower Power. And wait, the camera is here. It's a very nice brewery. It looks like his brewery looks like some Colorado breweries. So it's a very small brewery that does high end beers. He is specialized in IPA, so all of his IPAs are amazing, but particularly I like more his lagers. He's been for a while now into Czech lagers,
Oh,
and
wow.
he does amazing job. We went together to Czechia in a mission, in a beer mission last year, and I'm very glad that he's doing all these nice lagers there. So it's a nice brewer for you to check. It's called Koala Sun Brew.
Fantastic. So let's dive into Brazil. Uh, can you give us the short version of the history of beer in Brazil? I mean, what was the culture like coming through the past century and even beyond? I mean, how did beer get its start in Brazil?
Well, there was a lot of small breweries in the south of Brazil where you have a lot of German immigration in that
Okay.
side. But uh, we have like AB Bev. It's from Brazil, and they
Yeah.
have today around 65% of market share there. So before all the history of AB Bev used to be a few larger breweries, and then they merged, and that's the beginning of AB Bev's history in Brazil.
Yeah.
And they used to
Which
have 70%, and now it's 65. Well,
Which I want to interject real quick. I've heard people say that AB InBev, everyone assumed they were Belgians, and that's, I believe, the story I have right from when I worked for a company owned by AB InBev. It was like Anheuser Busch was bought out by a Belgian company, and then that larger company was bought out by a bigger company, or at least they merged. There was AB, and then there's Ambev, and then you have AB InBev.
yes.
But when people think about it, it's a Budweiser, for example, is an American beer, and it is. But people think, oh, it's owned by Belgians. How Belgians love beer? Well, that whole AB InBev is actually owned. by Brazilians,
It's
and
great
and
story.
and and all judgment aside, this just factually speaking, and one of the people I used to work with and work for was one of the high level people in Anheuser Busch
Mm.
when this whole thing happened. And he shared with me that he left Anheuser Busch after that all happened because he didn't like what he saw, and he said that basically now these beer brands are owned by, as he put it, by bankers, not beer people, but bankers in Brazil. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, definitely. The whole story is very complicated because it's so many merges and it's kind of difficult to keep track of it. But it was the two largest brewers in Brazil. They merged to form Ambev, and then they bought the Belgian one. They
Mm,
merged
yeah,
with the Belgian brewery that was Interbrew. I'm not so sure the names now. And then they did with they also merged or bought, I don't know the correct term, with Anheusen-Busch. And now they're this gigantic thing that we know. So it all
yeah,
started with this merge in Brazil of these two major brands that we have in the country. And yeah, so if you think about beer in Brazil, just some curiosity, I'm I'm gonna say that I think Brazilians are the people that drink the coldest beer in the world. When I mean cold, it's literally cold. You know, when you have like a bottle and it's all white, like because of it's so cold, like the ice starts to form in the bottle. That's how
wow.
people like to drink beer in bars. So if you see
But but in all fairness, northern Brazil is parallel to Ecuador, which is Spanish for equator, so it's hot there.
it's very hot, yes, but
Yeah.
it's just like ice cold beer. So every time that I talk to somebody that visits Brazil and they are from some or other country, they always comment this like, "Oh my god, the beer is so cold," and
So did you guys originate the slushy IPAs or the slushy beers?
it's just that we have all kinds of names for the bottle when the bottle gets this white. So that's when people get crazy about in a regular bar, in a regular setting. So I would say that's how we drink beer, and we also in bottles from 600 mls. I don't do imperial. I don't know how to say
No,
in ounces.
no, that's
So
okay. Yeah, that is roughly I think an American pint is just shy of half a liter. So
yeah, so it's
so
that's the specific bottle that I don't usually see in other places. So that's the regular setting. You go to a bar, you drink lots of these beers, usually in bottle, uh, and very, 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 very cold. And also with the glasses that come out of the fridge, all like this kind of thing.
yeah.
This is the majority of the beer that is drank in the country. Brazil is the thirdest biggest producer of beer in the world. So we are behind China and the US. But Brazilians drink less than Czechs, which they one that drinks the most. So we
Well,
drink
the
around
entire world
70
drinks
liters.
less than
Yeah,
the
right? We drink around 70 liters a year per capita. And every kind of state has its own thing. Brazil is very diverse on this. But I would say if you think like if you arrive in Brazil and you are in the beach or you are in Rio, that's what you're gonna find usually close to the beach. This type of beer. And
so
Heineken is too bitter for Brazilians as well. So we
Heineken
don't,
is too bitter.
yeah,
Interesting.
for the regular beer drinker, not the craft beer drinker.
So let's talk about the type of beer. I'm assuming it's all pale lager. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, American light lager. That's the one that people drinks the most.
Okay, because of the influence of what is now AB InBev, and that's how the story all ties together, right? Because they push it out. Mexico has Corona, but you can find your beach anywhere. So AB InBev is going to put their find your beach beer all throughout the
Yeah.
hot places in the world.
Definitely. But we have our own brands. It's called Skol, Brahma, and I think Skol, Brahma, Antarctica. I think they are the main. Uh, Skol and Brahma are the main beers from AB InBev in Brazil. But we also find Corona and all the other beers that they have
Yeah.
in other places as well.
And I think every country has its own thing. The the first one that comes to my mind from at least that part of the world, I'm thinking of Argentina has Quilmes,
Yeah.
which is kind of it's all kind of the same
Yes, and
beer.
it's also
It's
from
not
AB
bad. I enjoy
InBev.
it.
Yeah, it's also from
Yeah,
AB InBev, and also
yeah,
Patagonia, which is also from AB InBev.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So what is happening in Brazil as far as so we have all these macro brews, just like
Mm,
the rest of the world has their macro brews, America and everywhere. But what's happening as far as the craft beer in
okay.
Brazil?
Well, now, as data from 2021 from the Ministry of Agriculture, there is now in Brazil 1,549 breweries, including the macro breweries. But this we can probably say we have around, I don't know, 50, 70 breweries that are larger. The rest is all microbreweries. So I would say that we probably have 1,500 microbreweries, small breweries in Brazil. We don't have anything as big as Samuel Adams, like you have in the States, these big craft breweries. So we usually have very small comparing to the US, to the scenario on the US. And 86% of these breweries are all in the south and southwest of Brazil. So the north, we have less breweries, less microbreweries.
Why is that? I
Well,
would imagine there'd be more breweries along the coast.
yeah, well, that's the São Paulo is the state that has more breweries, and it's
Okay.
also the state that has more money. So
Okay.
usually, and craft beer in Brazil, it's not that affordable. You know, it's something that it's not as accessible. So you have a concentration in the southwest and the south as well, because there is a lot of German immigration. So the city, we have a city there is called Blumenau. They have the second biggest Oktoberfest in the world. And it's so funny because it's a very German city. You know, if you go there, you're like, am I in Brazil? And in even some places, people speak German. So it's kind of funny to see that we have all these different cultures going on. And they also have a lot of breweries in this state. In Santa Catarina is the third state that has more breweries in Brazil. My state's the fourth, but it's all concentrated in the southwest, a bit because of economics. The north of Brazil, it's a little bit more poor, so we have less microbreweries there. So it's only
Eh,
14%, if you consider the north, northeast, and center of Brazil.
Well, and I want to paint the picture of the culture in Brazil a little bit more and how it relates to the beer. And do I understand correctly that in Brazil the just the divide between the people with affluent and a lot of resources and those who have very little uh, is that still just a huge divide? I mean, is it still you have the rich and the poor and very few people in between, or how would you describe it?
Yeah, well, inequality is a big thing in Brazil, and if you paint the picture, the south and the southwest is the regions that are more wealthy,
Okay,
comparing to the north. So if you're thinking about beautiful places to visit, you probably want to go to the north, right? They have like amazing beaches. I love like Bahia. It's a state that I really enjoy. The people are very nice there. But if you compare to São Paulo, no, São Paulo is our New York kind of
okay.
thing. So, and inequalities in Brazil, it's everywhere. So you don't need to go to the north to see, like, poverty. It's in every city, and it's kind of crazy because it's just side by side. It's that's a big problem in Brazil. Inequality, definitely.
And so, how does that play out into the beer world? You mentioned that not everyone can afford a a craft beer or micro beer from Brazil. Is that kind of follow along those lines of the economic divide down there?
Yeah, I think if you look in history, it's this is where people used to drink. So, uh, uh, well, if you think about the whole history of how a light lager came up and how it started in Brazil, it's a little bit dissimilar. But people are not very used to like different beers. They were used to just that type of beer. So the craft beer movement and the oldest craft breweries in Brazil, they are something like 30 years old. So we don't have that older microbreweries, you know. So I would say max 40 years or 35. So it's a very kind of young scene, and Brazilians are used to drink a lot of beer. You know, like barbecue. A barbecue in Brazil, it's like something that lasts hours, like hours. You go to your friend's house like around 11 in the morning and you leave God knows
Wow.
when, you know. So we barbecuing and drinking beer all the time. So that's like you want a light lager for that, right? To keep drinking these long hours.
Yeah, to keep the pace.
Yeah, so like the craft beer for some people usually see it's too heavy because the other one it's so watered down. People kind of see it's like a heavier beer, and if they make the calculation, well, if I'm gonna drink 10 or however, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So let's say Heineken, it's something like the nice beer that you take to a barbecue, and then on top of that is like craft beer. If you're very into craft beer, then you're probably gonna find a barbecue on your friend's house that it's a home brew and then he did some beer, and you're gonna do the same like the barbecue, a lot of meat and beer. It's a
Yeah.
good combination.
That actually sounds fantastic. But when I go to a barbecue like that, granted I'm not there that long because this guy needs to get to bed at some point. But so I will have my light, easy drinking beers to kind of begin. Kind of show up and be social and just kind of relax. But when dinner is served, that's usually when I pull out something that I've pre-planted. I know what we're having for food. This is the beer I want to pair with it because I'm thinking about the flavors, how they interact, because that's how I operate.
Yeah.
I know I'm not alone, but not everyone thinks this way. So I start out with those light, easy drinking beers, and then I have a beer dedicated just for this meal, and then maybe go back to something easy. Do people do that in Brazil?
Well, definitely, but if you go to like the traditional barbecue kind of thing, there is not like a the meal, you know. There is not like a point that you're gonna okay make your plate and sit. Is That's not very common. You're
Okay.
just gonna be like eating bites of meat every time that leaves the barbecue. So if you go to a Brazilian steakhouse, they're gonna come with this long the I forgot the name of
Like
the
sausage?
no, like the iron thing that you skew the
Oh,
meat
okay.
on. So
Okay, yeah,
they're
yeah.
gonna come with that on your plate to slice the meat for you
Okay.
all the time, you know. So every time they're gonna pass with a different cut of meat or something like this. So if you are doing a barbecue in your friends, you usually buy a lot of different types of meat, garlic bread, and that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna eat little bit of meat and drink beer and eat garlic bread the whole time. So there
Oh,
is
that
not
sounds amazing.
usually like okay, that's time for we sit down and have dinner. No, we having like a small dinner, you know, all
Yeah.
for like 4 or 5 hours, but. It's different everywhere in Brazil, but this is like I would say the traditional barbecue. In America,
Oh,
I see that people do like burgers and something like this on the grill, and then they
mhm.
stop and eat. So we don't do this. We just have a beer in our hand, and we're talking. We're very social people, and we're talking, drinking beer, and eating meat.
Yeah, we like to make sure that we have all our food is ready, and we try to get everything so it cooks so that it is all done at once. So if we're putting corn on the grill or hot dogs for the kids and either burgers or if someone is just really ambitious and they want to grill something really nice like a brisket, well, they're going to start that, hours before, but so that it all hopefully ideally finishes right about the same time so we can put it all out there and say, all right, everyone, you bang that metal triangle, ding, 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 ding. It's chow time. Grab your plate. Let's sit down. Let's eat. It now is the time. And that's kind of how we do it here in the US.
Yeah, well, we can do something alike, but it's just very small. We also do farofa with barbecue, which is like a cassava flour that you can also
Mm.
put eggs and bacon and a little bit of vinaigrette. So your plates like this, maybe rice, some vinaigrette, cassava flour, and meat. But you usually drinking the same beer if you're in a regular barbecue. But if you are in a beer geek barbecue, then usually, okay,
At your
somebody
house or
brings
my
something
house.
nice. Yeah, somebody brings something nice and you kind of sharing around. But all my geek friends that usually when we do barbecues, somebody had brew some beer that we gonna have that one on a keg for the barbecue. Usually how it goes.
Yeah,
And
that's
you were
perfect.
talking also about the craft beer scene in Brazil. A lot of breweries started with people that were home brews, and then they decide to open their own brewery.
So we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this topic, the whole idea of the cultural attitude about beer. I mean, so you've said that we drink a lot of beer, we being the Brazilians, which I'm not, but the Brazilians drink a lot of beer, and it's usually light, easy drinking, and is very very cold for obvious reason. It's a very hot environment, and so if you put your beer in a glass, you're gonna have all the condensation is going to warm up by the time you're halfway done. So this is just part of the area. But what is the attitude about beer, about alcohol, about all that?
Well, we were talking about something more on the general public. I don't know if I actually understand the question. Sorry.
So I think the question is, in some places like a previous guest, we talked about he's opening a brewery in the Middle East in Abu
Mhm.
Dhabi, and so there are some it's a very international area. You may have been there. You probably already know this, but you have all these cultures represented in the small area, but there is a religious aspect to it where alcohol is somewhat frowned upon. It's not as easy to find as it would be somewhere else.
Oh, okay.
But so what are the all the attitudes, whether it's economic or religious or hedonistic? How do Brazilians approach alcohol and beer for the most part?
Well, I'm talking about my city specific. We are known from like the city that has more bars per capita in Brazil. It's called my city is called Belo Horizonte, a beautiful horizon.
Mm,
If I translate to English, and we love bars. That's how we meet our friends. We gonna okay, let's go to a bar and we usually drink beers. If you're talking more about like the craft beer thing, you usually go to a brewery. In my state, it's the fourth state that has more breweries, and it's very easy to go for breweries, and they have a lot of tap rooms. We also have Hofbrauhaus
mm.
in my city. I think it's the only Hofbrauhaus in Latin America. And
Like owned by Hofbräu.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow,
And it's very nice. So
wow.
you can go there and have your own mass of like of a beer, and the brewery is
I'll,
amazing. It's just
I'll
like
bet that beer gets warm.
yeah, well, every time that I go there, I like to drink a dunkel in the mass. I think it's
Yeah.
my go to thing, just to enjoy the heavy weight of the glass, you know.
Yes. So you can work on your arms at the same time, right?
Exactly. So I would say that we are very into like drinking, socializing through alcohol. So you're gonna find a lot of people drinking in bars and restaurants everywhere. Uh, we are a little bit different in the US and in some other parts of the world that you cannot have any alcohol and drive. It's zero tolerance for that. But in general, there is no like it's drinking alcohol, it's very much part of our culture, and I would say more beer. We also have like a distilled beverage called cachaça, which is
I
the
love
national,
cachaça.
yeah,
I
national.
love cachaça.
So I
Oh,
guess you like caipirinhas in the summer
oh,
as well.
that's my go-to drink. That and rum and cokes. That's my go-to drink if I'm not drinking beer in the summertime.
Yeah, well, I
It's
enjoy
heaven.
some caipirinhas as well. I think it's a very nice drink to drink in the beach, but you have to watch out for the lemon. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's something that you're gonna find everywhere as well. But people drink more beer than cachaça. It's a more heavy uh,
yeah.
liquor. So
What is the cultural attitude with drinking age and raising children around alcohol as well? I know in the U.S. We tend to be a little conservative about that. And in other cultures, it's like, well, kids will taste. I mean, the kids aren't getting drunk, but they will taste beer. They will taste wine. That's part of the culture. And some drinking ages are 16, some is 18. In the U.S. is 21. How has that come out in Brazil?
in Brazil, the legal age to drink it's 18. Um, but in my time, when I was at that age, well, we could buy beer as a child to take to your parents, you know. So it was something like, okay, go to the supermarket, bring me a beer, a pack of cigarettes, and I don't, and you can buy candy for you. So this, we were kids, and we could buy it. It was very like mind blowing when I think it now. Uh, I would like to see a little bit more restriction on selling alcohol to minors in Brazil. I think I like the US thing where they ask for your ID. You know, I think it's nice. I don't see this a lot, but legally you only allowed to drink at 18. But I wouldn't say it's very rigid, you know. And I keep thinking about this since I come a lot to Europe. In Germany and Belgium is 16 years old. You can buy beer. You can drink beer in bars, restaurants. And sometimes I wonder, you know, what if this is something that, considering all the other drugs there's out there, and if we tie things too much, people are gonna look into other things. When I lived in the United States, everybody that I met drink before they were 21. Everybody had a fake ID. So it is conservative, but people are doing anyway. So I wonder,
Yeah,
it's just like, is it a good idea then to say you can only drink at 21 when everything is happening? And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder, are we humans very into drugs in general? Should we, you know, legalize everything and try to
yeah,
control? And so it's a question that I'm asking myself a lot, because if you think on a health perspective, you wouldn't be drinking alcohol.
yeah.
So
Because I mean, I think about teenagers, and I've got teenagers at home, and their bodies are still growing.
yes,
Their experience is still developing. Their brains are still developing till they're in their early mid 20s. And so I think about all these substances that are going to affect that, and I mean that's why the U.S. age is set at 21, is because our brains are still developing, and so having these substances that we're not, at least at the time, completely clear on how it affects us. I don't want to take too much time about that on this podcast, but that would be an incredible panel to have at some virtual conference or live conference, where you have all these beer people and you have these physicians, and just really diving into this topic and what is healthy, what is good, what is, because I let my children taste my beer, because I don't want them to turn 18, get out of the house, find a fake ID, end up
yeah.
doing keg stands, because it's like, hey, I have freedom in the world now. Let's blow this joint. I want them to approach that like, I've been tasting beer with my dad since I was young. That's awful. Why would you guys drink that?
Yeah, I understand that a lot. And I think sometimes I think to the perspective of like, okay, you cannot buy alcohol, but you can buy heavier drugs. And I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I'm also very interested in this topic, and I've been reading a lot about sobriety, why people choose to not to drink, and the effects of alcohol in your body. So I agree with you that on this perfect world, we'll be drinking at 25.
Yeah.
But that's not the reality. So sometimes I wonder, and I would do the same, like you said. Okay, I prefer them to try with you and to understand how is to get drunk than to just do it by themselves on this, and I don't know. I just think like having this scenario at home where you are aware of the consequences of alcohol. It's a good thing to teach to
Yeah.
younger people. Yeah, definitely.
Well, and being a beer educator, both of us, I think that's a part of our duty, our obligation is to share that yes, this, I when I talk to people, I say beer is a tool. And just like a baseball bat or anything from any other culture, I can take a baseball bat and hit a home run and I'm a hero, or I can bash in someone's headlights in their windshield and I'm a criminal.
Yes.
It's not the bat's fault. The
Yes.
bat didn't do anything. It was the person and how they used that tool. And I think beer is the same way. And we need to share how we can make this tool uh, uh, increase our experience and our joy, not decrease it. And but now we're heading down a different rabbit hole. But
Yeah.
if you want to cap anything off, feel free. But I want to ask you more about Brazilian beer.
Yeah, no, I totally, I'm very into this topic right now, and I actually think craft beer it's a nice product to we think about beer in a different way. I said before that in Brazil we drink a lot of beer. If you see like early commercials of beer, everybody is like have a tray with so many bottles. All the macro breweries they kind of push this idea to you drink a lot, and if you have like a light lager, you're not gonna have just one, right?
Yeah,
So I do like the idea of thinking about craft beer because it's more flavorful to you reduce your consumption and enjoy alcohol in a different way. So uh, because it's probably healthier for you drinking less than whatever you're
yeah.
drinking. Yeah.
Yeah, because I always think about, okay, for those of us who are drinking to take the edge off, and I'm guilty. I'm guilty of having an extra one on a Friday night. I'm guilty of pushing out this drinking culture on my Instagram. Uh, but I think about what is it we're really trying to sell here? Are we trying to sell the taste, the experience, or are we trying to sell the quantity of taking the edge off because I had a hard week, or there's a news report that came out that most people feel lonely or depressed, particularly after the pandemic. We're
Yeah.
still feeling lonely and depressed and isolated. And so it's easy to grab one more beer, especially you've got a fridge full of beer behind you. I've got
Yes.
fridges in my garage full of beer. It's easy just to go grab one more. Uh, but that's but the question is why?
Yeah.
Why are we doing that?
And especially for us that work in the brewery industry, we usually have a lot of alcohol available, like you see here. And I also get a lot of beer for free that people send me.
Yeah,
So I spend the last year, like the end of the year, usually I stop drinking for like 15 days alcohol at all. So I'm enjoying a lot the non-alcoholic scene now.
same here.
And for me, it was just like, okay, I'm going to read more about the bad effects of alcohol to kind of help me out uh, when I wanted to drink an extra one, just like, oh, okay, I already have one, two. So I'm doing this for the curiosity
I
as
do the same
well.
thing.
Yeah, I'm like very into now kind of dive into the studies. I follow some people in Brazil that I like a lot that they criticize scientific studies a lot, and I'm very into. I don't know anybody that does this, but reading the scientific papers about alcohol and criticizing it, bringing other perspective, uh, especially because it's if you start reading it, it's just like, oh my god, there is a lot of problems of
Yeah.
drinking, even in moderation. So
Again, I would love to have a panel of people to discuss this, and you are the first one on my list. But let's get back to Brazil and the beautiful let's get back to drinking culture in Brazil after that conversation, right? One of the, first beers that I had that was supposedly from Brazil, I absolutely fell in love with. Doing some research, I found that this beer, oh gosh, my memory's failing me now, but I think it was, created by people in America, and it may have been brewed in Brazil and imported back, and I kinda lost the details of that, but that beer is Zinju, the black beer. Are you familiar with it?
Xingu with an
Uh,
X.
yes, Xingu. How do you pronounce it properly?
In Brazil, we pronounce Xingu.
Xingu. Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
So,
that's amazing.
are you familiar with that beer?
Yes, and it's funny because they start brewing. I think they stopped brewing this beer for a while, and they came back 1 year ago or 2 years ago. So it was kind of recently, and there is also this culture in Brazil of these dark, sweet lagers that people used to say it's good for mothers that are breastfeeding, which is
Okay,
mind
yeah.
blowing. But this beer was one of this that was a favorite for this one. So it's kind of like a
Okay,
sweet dark lager,
interesting.
and yeah, it's produced now in as a contract brewery, and it's funny to see that that's what it gets in other countries, but initially they did that to export. So this
Okay.
is a little bit of the story. I don't know a lot in deep on of their history, uh, but what I remember is something like this. They started to brew this beer for like an exported market, and you could find as well in Brazil this type of this specific beer. We
And,
call it mouse beer.
they call it what beer?
Mouse beer. That's the kind of style of beer. It's like a sweet dark lager.
Yeah, 'cause, I think they compared it to a Schwarzbier, and yes, it is dark like a Schwarzbier. It's, like a dark amber to brown, but it doesn't taste anything like a Schwarzbier.
No,
It's
it's
it's probably closer to a Dunkel than anything else, but I
a
believe
little
it's
bit
a
more sweeter.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
it but it was fantastic. Is that a beer that is representative of some of the the beer from Brazil? Or I don't wanna say craft, but the craft
mm,
beer from Brazil?
I would say there is a interesting history about that. I was when I was uh, in London. I went to the Oxford University
Mhm.
to visit the Michael Jackson collection,
Oh, cool.
and it's amazing thing. I spent so many hours there, and I wanted to see what files he had on Brazil, and he had files on Xingu. So that was what it was famous at that time. So it's like I said, now they stopped brewing, and I think because of the craft beer market got a little bit more excited, he decided to brew this beer back. So you can find it now, but it's a little bit difficult. I don't find it in my state very easy
Mm,
actually. So I have to look for it. And so there's a long time that I don't drink this beer, but it's funny that you bring that up because I remember seeing Xingu and Palm, which I never heard in Brazil before in Total Wine. When I lived
yeah,
in Florida, I love to go to Total Wine and just
yeah,
get lost in there.
because I don't love their warm shelves, but I love their selection.
Yeah.
So, but I had that beer, really enjoyed that beer, but I was a little skeptical about Shinju and as far as whether it truly was representative of Brazil or not. But the beer that I really wanna find out more about that is purportedly to be, originated in Brazil would be the Catarina Sour.
Oh yes, yes. The Catarina Sour it started all in 2021 with some people from the south or from Santa Catarina, the state. Which there is the city Blumenau is in Santa Catarina, the city that I was talking before. And the Catarina Sour, it's not an official BJCP style yet,
Not
but it's
yet,
on the
not
yeah,
yet.
yet. We are really hoping to.
It's in, like, the staging ground ready to become its own style.
Yes, so it's like a strong Berliner Weiss, with fruit, with fresh fruit character. So
Yeah.
in the south, you can find a lot with all these different fruits, and it's a very interesting beer. I love to serve it in my tastings in a champagne glass, can be a flute or something like this, just to have like people more mind blow at me, because when you have a beer which is like pink or different colors from the fruit, that already get people a little bit like, is this beer? Uh, and then I put in a different glass to exacerbate. Oh, this is a difficult one to pronounce.
Exacerbate.
Yes, that one. This idea of just like, oh, but is this beer doesn't taste like beer? I was just, no, it doesn't taste like lager. It doesn't taste like,
Thank
the
you.
beers that you used to drink, but this is beer. And it's very nice to see people getting excited about it, because this is for the people that are not into craft beer in Brazil. It's very nice to introduce different beers so people can get excited about the beer culture, the real beer culture.
Well, and they're hard to find. I think I've only found one, and ironically, it was made by Deschutes Brewery in Oregon,
Oh,
and they made a Catarina sour with guava. I think it was.
oh,
It was awesome. I don't know if it was legit or not. It's the only sample I've ever had,
okay.
uh, but it was fantastic because on a hot day. I mean, as we're recording this, we're in May, we're heading towards summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. Just like in Brazil, when it's hot, I want something cold, I want something refreshing,
Yes.
and really, I want something sour. So I love, if I'm going to have a margarita, why not have a gosa? If I want to have a caipirinha, why not have a Catarina instead? You have these options to really bring out these hot weather beers, and
Definitely.
I absolutely loved it, and I can't wait to find more because it was just beautiful.
I was just going to say, I have a brewery that I also go a lot. I told you the Koala Sun Brew is one of my favorite breweries, and it's side by side with another brewery that I like a lot. It's called Veraci, and they make a Catarina sour with guava.
Mm,
I'm not so sure now if they have guava and passion fruit. I need to remember, but it's delicious. It's very delicious, and I love guava. So
mhm.
it's very a summer drink, which is in Brazil. I say that we have like super hot and not as hot. The weather is
Yeah,
kind of like this.
yeah. So we just talked about two beers that may or may not be representative of Brazil. Are there other styles that the rest of the world hasn't really seen or latched onto yet, but that are just really defining the emerging craft beer styles coming out of Brazil?
Well, what I said, I think Xingu, like it is about Brazilian history, but I wouldn't say that it's very representative of the craft beer movement. Maybe now that they start brewing back, could be, but the Catarina sour definitely. So a lot of small breweries have a Catarina sour, and I personally like a lot of beers made with different Brazilian woods. So
Mm,
my favorite one, it's my favorite wood. It's called amburana or umburana, and it has like this hints of cinnamon on it.
mm,
So it's a very specific wood, and I really enjoy it. One of my favorite beers used to be a imperial porter aged in amburana barrels. So it's very delicious. The amburana thing. Uh, it's very potent, so if you're gonna use it as a home brew, you should really be kind of careful, or maybe use chips and control it a little bit. But it's a very interesting wood, and if I was looking into Brazilian beers, I would definitely try to find some of the different woods. There is also a brewery that I like a lot that's called Coisa Linda, like pretty thing. And they are from the south. They are from Santa Catarina as well, and they make wild beers, and they have wild beers in a lot of different woods. So I really wish they start their exporting program so we can start telling people from other places like what's different about the Brazilian beer scene. So I'll definitely check the wood. I definitely would check the Catarina sour, and we now have hops in Brazil. So I would definitely look for
No
Brazilian
way.
hops. Yeah, this is something that I'm so super excited about. Uh, I think now there is currently 80 hop farms in Brazil, and things are going to be mind blowing in the next few years. It's something
And
that started, I would say, 12 years ago, but more in a trial and error kind of thing. But now we have an association of hops. In my city, there is also one nice big farm that's called Mundo Hop. Um, and it's very nice what they have. I'm trying to remember what type of hop they do. On my mind,
well,
it's Cascade, but it's not
it,
Cascade.
and
Uh,
and I'm trying to think about how that's possible because hops are driven by the amount of daylight and the change of daylight. So
yes.
how does that work when you're just south of the equator?
Well, people are using artificial lighting
Okay,
to
okay,
so
so
for,
they're
for,
they're
for
covering
getting the
the
long hours of
okay.
sun, they are using artificial light. All the
So it's a quote unquote grow operation.
Yes, but it's new.
Okay.
Uh, uh, I was in a conference last year, and I was surprised about all the numbers and everything about Brazilian hops because it was very small in the beginning and everybody was like, oh, okay, let's see people trying. But I think on the pandemic, people got very into this, and now it starts to getting very professional, and I'm enjoying a lot to seeing this. I've tried some beers made with Brazilian hops and I was very surprised. It's still a little bit
Wow.
of a stigma even for brewers in Brazil. So sometimes I talk to some brewers and they feel skeptical about, and that's okay. But I really wish everybody embraced this with full heart because we are the country of agriculture. So I would be watching out from United States and Germany to maybe we become like the biggest producer of hops in the world in,
Well, you
I don't
heard
know.
it here first. That's exciting. I was
Yes,
not
very
aware of that. I'm
exciting.
looking. I'll have to dive into that. One thing you mentioned, the woods, the woods that Brazilian uses, is just very unique. Do I remember this correctly? And tell me if I'm mispronouncing it, and tell me if I have this wrong. But
Okay.
Dogfish Head put out an imperial porter with a Agent Santo Palomaron
I think
wood.
it's Palo Santo, the wood you're
Palo
trying to.
Santo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I think you're right.
But
Uh,
this is, I
is
think
that
it's
Brazilian wood as
Peruvian.
well?
I'm not, no, it's not something common in Brazil, Palo Santo.
Okay.
Yeah, we are have more like a amburana. I think it's the one that people use a lot, and you can find lots of cachaça with amburana. Sassafras, it's also another
Yeah.
type of wood. Uh, I'm trying to remember some others because it's not very easy to find. Amburana is the one that brewers use the most. Not barrels. The majority of the people that I know they use cheaps.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, if I recall any other name, I'll tell you. We do a lot of things in the American oak. That's the bourbon one
Yeah. Yep.
because the barrels are so available. So there
And
is a lot.
oak is like
Yeah,
meant for
yeah.
liquid. Yeah.
So, but my favorite is definitely Amburana. It's the one that I
Ambrana.
usually are. If it's in the shelf, I'll like, oops, I want to try this one. So,
Ooh, I'll have to look for that.
yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and or predict the future. 10 years from now,
Mhm.
20 years from now, however far out you want to go. What do you anticipate coming out of Brazil in terms of beer?
Mm, well, I really hope we don't have that hiccup that, like in the US, that the numbers of breweries went down because now we are in a financial kind of crazy situation all over the world. So I don't know how is the numbers gonna be for the next years, but after the pandemic, things are starting to grow a little bit more. So I hope we have more and more beers, and I'm very excited about the hops in Brazil. So I would say in 10 years, we're going to have more beers, or we're going to hear way more about Brazilian hops. And it's nice because then we can maybe have cheaper beers in Brazil, because everything is imported, right? We
Yeah.
have a barley there. We have like the biggest producer of malt in South America is in Brazil. It's called Agraria,
Mm.
and it's a cooperative. Is that how you say in English? Or
Yeah.
am I inventing this word?
Or cooperative is how I'd say it in my native tone, but you said it perfectly.
Yeah. So they have just a standard Pilsen malt and also pale ale malt. So we have a few breweries that have like 100% of national ingredients. There is also a nice project going on that's called Manipoeira, that's going to be released this year. It's a project from the Craft Beer Association of Brazil, Brazilian Craft Beer Association, called Abracerva, which I helped founding it in 2013. And we've done some nice projects together. And this beer from Manipoeira, they get the cassava, the raw cassava, they press it, and they ferment a beer with the microorganisms from this liquid, which is very exciting. But I really wanted to try to see what's gonna to see what's going to taste, because it's a new thing.
Mhm.
So I'm really into seeing. I expect we can see more things about the Brazilian terroir, or the Brazilian specific Brazilian beers. Because now, if you go to any craft beer bar, you're gonna find IPAs, double IPAs, triple IPAs, everything IPA, or pastry stout, imperial stout. All of this. I'm trying to take a little break of IPA, despite I'm having one now.
Today notwithstanding.
Yeah, but it's everywhere, right? It's a little annoying that you go to a bar and like all of the taps are IPAs.
Yeah.
But it's what people want to drink. So I think would be cool to have like beers made with Brazilian hops, Brazilian malt, yeast. So I hope in the future we have more of this in beer, and we can have actually a few larger microbreweries that can bring a more accessible price for people to try. That would be nice. So I hope we, in 10 years, going to be we are in a place that's more excited for everybody else in the industry.
Well, I hope to see more than Katarina Sauer on the style guidelines, where whoever puts them together. I That's kind of what I see in the future, is as beer's becoming an international culture, like we talked about, everyone's going to play with their own thing. I mean, that's how, we started with porters and stouts in England, and then there was an export stout because they wanted it over there. So we needed to add hops and add alcohol, and then it goes around to the Baltic Sea, and they're like, "Hey, well, let's make a Baltic porter." It goes to the Caribbean. It's like now we have a tropical stout. And that's how these styles evolve over time. And I'm looking forward to seeing Brazilian IPAs, Brazilian this, Brazilian that, along with other parts of the world. That, to me, that's what I hope to see. And by the time I'm ready to retire from all of this stuff, I hope there's just far too many
Oh,
options to start with. That would be awesome.
definitely. Let's hope that. I hope that maybe you can find a beer in the States, because I know that they have like some um, cooperations with some breweries, that so the beer is brewed in America, but the brewery is called Japas. Like
Mm,
from it's Japas is like Japanese in Brazil, but it's a brewery with four uh, women that they are all like they have a Japanese, how did I say it, Japanese descendancy. I don't know how the word now.
okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
know that if you follow them on Instagram, you're gonna see that they have a lot of collaborations with brewers in the US, and they have some of their beers around in New York or something like this. So
Mm,
maybe it's a beer that the people that are listening your podcast can find easily, to try a little bit of the Brazilian
yeah. I'll have to look for
taste,
that.
because Brazil is there is the largest immigration from Japan is in Brazil. So there is a very big Japanese community in Brazil.
Interesting. I'll have to look for that. Now that I'm aware of it, I'm sure I'll probably see it everywhere now. You know, now that I'm aware of it. For the sake of time, we have a few closing questions. But before I go to those closing questions, one big question I want to ask you is: I mean, you have a lot of experience as a beer sommelier, traveling around the world. But from your experience, how do you define a great beer experience? How do you define and deliver a great beer experience?
Well, I define a great experience when you can really touch somebody through their sensory, when you can present something for people that you can see in their eyes that they're glowing and they're very excited about. I really enjoy doing brewery tours, especially because there are a lot of people that goes on this. That's their first time visiting a brewery, and they're people are used to drink a lot of beer, but they're not used to think about how is that brewed, so you have like all these nice questions like, oh, what time do we put the alcohol? I really love this because we're talking to somebody that it enjoys beer, but it's open for new experiences. So I love to bring people inside the brew house and to drink beer straight from the tank. So that's, for me, it's also when I visit breweries, that's the moment that I'm like a kid, just like, oh my God, I really want to try this. So I like a lot drinking beers straight from the tank. And I think bring people inside this and sharing a little bit of like, how is it made? And they can make it in their house. And from this perspective, when I'm guiding, I love to see the reaction of people and always bringing some information that they can work out and they can tell their friends. So, we can expand our community. And from my perspective, it's all about people, so it's very nice when you visit a brewery and people are very open to share their passion with you, so you can connect through beer. That's, for me, it's something nice. So it can be from drinking from the tank. That's something that I consider very exclusive, or just sitting down and sharing information. I've been to so many nice visits. I went to My first visit in Europe was in the Brabander, the brewery, and they made the Petrus, the Outbrewing.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I
And
love that
it
beer.
was such an amazing visit. I could drink it from the fooders and trying it from different ages. It's just like I can if I close my eyes, I can revisit I can do the whole tour again. And it was amazing. And Emmanuel, who did the tour, he was so nice. And okay, he showed me all the brewery. And then we stopped, we sit, we tried. And it was amazing. I remember this very vivid. Also, when I went to Germany, to Schunrammer, which does, oh my God, they're hellas. It's something from the gods. So it's really nice when you can have this type of experience when people are giving their attention to show their product. For me, it's how you do it. It can be very simple. It can be just talking, but being open and sharing your passion. It's something that I enjoy, and I enjoy a lot when people also do this to me, like when they share with me.
Uh, I love that because for me, I love working with those people who are intellectually curious, who are attuned to their senses,
Yeah,
and are a little hedonistic because life can be hard.
yeah,
Let's just have a good time, but just to have that understanding of there's still those people where a beer is just a beer, but when
yeah.
you compare this beer and that beer, then this beer is clearly better, and when you know why, then you'll appreciate why even better. And so I love your answer on that one. Um, okay, so these are my closing questions. We can run through these pretty quick. But tomorrow you get to be queen of the entire world of beer for one day. God save the queen. What is the first thing you would like to change?
Well, well, well. I think if I have all this power, what I would do it's I would mandate the market share in Brazil for breweries not to be up to 30%. One brewery gets to have the max of 30% of the market share, and that's it. So we could see, I think would be chaos, but I would love that. So I don't know. It would be interesting to see this diversity, economically speaking, for other breweries as well. Because as I said, I don't think it's fair. One brewery has that much power, 65% of market share is a lot. I think in the US, if it's 33, I'm not so sure. Uh, I think it's limited in the US or not.
Um, I have to get back to you on that. I don't believe it's limited, just because of the whole capitalistic idea. But I mean, money is power, so it kind of happens naturally, if you will. Um, but there is a lot of that's the whole idea of the quote unquote American dream is, if you dream it, you can be it, and so the possibility is there. The reality may be a little bit more challenging for some, but I don't believe there's a mandate there.
Yeah, so I would be quite a weird queen. I would just say, like, nobody gets to get that big. We're limiting things here.
So the next question is, you've already traveled all over the world and you've had whatever you want to eat and drink. I'm going to change this question just a little bit for you. On your last day on Earth,
Mm.
where would you, because you were the benevolent queen that created massive chaos in the beer industry, we're going to send you anywhere you want in the world and you can have whatever you want to drink, but this will be your last day on Earth.
Ooh,
Where would you go and what would you have?
what a sad day. But yeah, I think I would choose something that I'm dying to. It's on my bucket list. So I would drink Westvletering Blonde straight from the tank in the monastery. That's probably would be it. Yeah, I really love this beer. I think the 12 is overrated. I like it, but San Bernardo's, it's also very good. And I do a
Yeah.
lot of Westvletering tasting in Brazil,
Yeah.
and that I bring with me. And it's funny because I like to do a blind taste. And it's funny to see the reaction of people looking for the best beer of the world. I like
Right.
it. The beer is amazing, and but the blonde is for me. It's just like, this is delicious. So I've been to the monastery to watch a mass. I'm not religious at all, but I really enjoy being inside
But
the
it's still very
monastery.
cultural. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I couldn't go to the brewery yet, so I'm very persistent. So I'm gonna visit at one point in life, I believe, because of my persistency. But if I had to choose, that would be it. I would be drinking a Westvletering Blonde with a monk inside the brewery from the tank.
Fantastic. So, why does good beer matter so much to you?
Good beer matters because it beers bring people together. Beer creates community. Beer creates friendship. So I think if I look back 10 years ago, I didn't have that much different friends all over the world. That's all connected because of a liquid. So this is very interesting. And you get to live only once. And if you're gonna drink alcohol, why drink bad alcohol? Why drink something that doesn't taste good? So good beer matters because yeah, taste for me matters. So that's all of this.
It's beautiful. So, for anyone listening, if they want to, if they're in Europe and they want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing, where can they go to connect?
Yeah, I live like in both countries actually. I pay taxes in Brazil.
Okay.
So yeah, that's
Officially, if anyone's listening,
yeah.
I pay taxes.
Exactly, right. So from Instagram, most probably, and if anybody wants more information or to get connected with some of the people that I said here, some of the names I said here, and I also apologize for my pronunciation, sometimes it's not very good, but you can find me at Pri Colares, and I'm very bad at spelling in English because it's just the letters sound different. So it's
Hmm.
Pri. E is I, right? From
Yep.
yeah, Pricolares. E as in
Perfect.
elephant, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
And I'm going to have it in the show notes. So Pricolares.
yeah. So you can shoot me a message there. I really love to chat with people, and yeah, that's how you find me. And my email is the same. So
Awesome. And final thing, do you have any calls to action, any final words of wisdom you want to share with the billions of people listening?
come to Brazil, come drink beer with us. There is some nice festivals around. So if you're really willing to do a different trip from like a different place, why not? It's a pretty country, and I'm pretty sure you can have new friends over there. I'll be delighted to get in touch with people from all over the world that are interested in know more about our culture, specific our beer culture.
Well, I can't wait to go visit, for a variety of reasons, most of all the beer. But thank you for sharing this information. Thank you for doing the work you do. Thank you for getting out there and traveling. And most of all, thank you for sharing pictures of that for the rest of us who don't get to travel that much. Thank you for kind of leading the charge in that. But Brazil is clearly a hot spot for so many things. We just need to pay attention and watch out for Brazilian hops and Brazilian beer in the future. But thank you for coming on to the podcast.
I hope so. Thank you very much for inviting me.
It was a pleasure. We can see Brazil's influence on the world through movies, music, sports, and more. It was only a matter of time before we started to see beer that was uniquely Brazilian to emerge. Given that this country has such a global impact, what's next, I wonder? In the next episode, we head to Southeast Asia to talk to a craft brewery that is navigating its way through culture and the global demand for craft. I'm on a virtual tour of the craft and culture of beer around the globe. I've put Good Beer Matters on video so I can take you along for the ride. If you know of a person, a place, or a beer story that needs to be told, let me know. Meanwhile, grab a beer, hang out with friends, and let your world open up. Thank you for listening. Cheers.